Some people run from things their whole lives and get very good at making the running look like something else. They call it ambition. They call it being independent. They call it keeping busy, staying focused, having standards, needing space. They build the vocabulary of it so carefully over so many years that eventually even they cannot tell the difference between choosing to move forward and refusing to stand still. I was one of those people. My name is Jasper Hale. I am 28 years old. I grew up in the city of Belmere and I have spent the better part of the last 6 years moving, between cities, between jobs, between versions of myself that I kept auditioning and discarding when they got too close to something real. I am a freelance travel writer, which is a profession that rewards exactly the kind of person I had become, which is someone who is always somewhere new and never anywhere long enough to be known. I was good at the work. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely good at describing places. I had a feel for the specific texture of somewhere, the way a city smelled in the morning, the quality of light in a particular coastal town, the sound of a village at midday when everything was still. I could put a reader inside a place, the irony being that I was never fully inside a place myself. I was always slightly outside it, observing, taking notes, already thinking about the next piece, the next destination, the next version of somewhere that was not where I currently was. The assignment that summer was a resort in the Alentejo region of Portugal. A new property called Quinta do Azul, 5 acres of converted farmland turned into a boutique hotel with 12 rooms, a central pool, a restaurant, and the specific atmosphere of somewhere that wanted you to slow down and meant it. My editor had sent me with a brief that said spend 10 days, write the real story, find what makes it different. I arrived on a Saturday in late June. The transfer from Lisbon had taken 2 hours through country that went from city to highway to hills, and then to the particular wide open landscape of the Alentejo, cork trees and lavender and red earth that looked like it had been there since before people had words for it. The resort sat at the end of a long stone road between olive trees, low and white and quiet in the afternoon heat. The pool was the first thing I saw when they showed me to my room. It was visible from my terrace, a long rectangular pool the color of a shallow sea, surrounded by white stone and terracotta pots of bougainvillea in deep pink and orange. The afternoon light was on the water and the whole thing looked like a painting of somewhere that was slightly too perfect to be real. There were 2 other guests visible from my terrace. A couple older, reading in the shade of an umbrella. And a man sitting alone at the far end of the pool with his feet in the water. He was not doing anything, not reading, not on his phone, just sitting with his feet in the water and his face turned toward the far hills where the late afternoon sun was doing something dramatic with the clouds. He had dark hair that was a little too long and the specific posture of someone who had gotten very comfortable with his own company. I looked at him for longer than I should have. Then I went inside and unpacked. His name was Rafael Sousa. I found this out at dinner that evening when the resort owner, a warm, energetic woman named Ini Circumflex who ran the place with the specific passion of someone who had put everything into it, introduced the guests to each other over aperitivos on the terrace. Rafael was Portuguese, from Porto originally, now living in Lisbon. He was 30 years old. He worked as an architect. He was at the resort for 2 weeks on what he described with a slight careful pause as a necessary break. I noticed the pause. I noticed the way he said it, not a vacation, not a holiday, but a necessary break. The way you say something when you are being honest but not quite all the way honest. He was quieter than anyone else at the table, not unfriendly, just contained. He answered questions when asked and asked 1 or 2 of his own and listened carefully when other people talked and did not perform conversation the way some people perform conversation at group dinners when they are not sure yet who anyone is. He looked at me twice during the dinner, both times directly, both times without looking away quickly the way people do when they are caught looking. He just held the eye contact for a moment and then moved on. I slept badly that night. Not because of him, because I slept badly most nights when I was somewhere new. It was one of the less glamorous aspects of my profession that I had normalized the specific restlessness of a body that was always adjusting to a new room, a new bed, a new version of silence. I got up before sunrise and went to the pool. Nobody else was there. The water was still and dark blue in the pre-dawn light and the air smelled like lavender and warm stone. I sat on the edge and put my feet in and it was cold at that hour and exactly what I needed. I sat there for 30 minutes writing notes on my phone for the piece, not the pool specifically but the feeling of it. The specific quality of a place that was designed for rest in a way that was sincere and not performative. The silence here was not empty, it was full of things that were not noise. I heard footsteps on the stone. He sat down beside me without asking, far enough that there was appropriate space, close enough that I was aware of him immediately. He had a coffee, he held it in both hands and looked at the water. "You write in the mornings," he said, not a question, he had noticed the phone. "I try to," I said, "before the day gets loud." He nodded. "I draw in the mornings," he said, "for the same reason." We sat without talking for a while. The sky went from dark blue to a lighter blue, and then the first color appeared on the horizon, a thin line of orange that spread slowly upward. The water caught it and went gold. "It is the same every morning," he said. "I have been watching it for 5 days, it is never exactly the same." "I know what you mean," I said. He looked at me sideways. "You have been here one night," he said. "I meant in general," I said. "Places look the same from a distance. You have to stay in one long enough to see the differences." He was quiet for a moment. "Is that hard for you?" he said, "staying in one?" I looked at the water. "Professionally obligatory to be bad at it," I said. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. We had breakfast together without planning to. The dining area was small, and by the time I came down from changing, the only other person there was him, and it would have been strange not to sit together. And then the strange became easy by the time the coffee arrived, and easy became the place we started from the next morning and the morning after that. I am aware this sounds like something said in hindsight, but I mean it as observation, the most genuinely present person I had met in a long time. He was not performing anything. He did not have the social energy of someone managing how they were being perceived. He just sat in places and looked at them and talked about things he actually thought. On the third day, I asked him what the necessary break was from. He was quiet long enough that I thought he was going to redirect. Then he said, "I was in a relationship for 3 years, it ended in February, and I handled it by doing the thing I do when I do not know what to do with something, which is work harder. I took on more projects. I filled every hour. And 6 weeks ago I was sitting at my drafting table at 1 in the morning realizing I could not remember what day it was, and I had not spoken to a friend in 2 months, and I had done all of this to avoid feeling something that I had not actually avoided at all. I had just delayed it." He stopped. "So I came here," he said, "to feel it, and stop running from it." I looked at him. The phrase landed in a specific place. Stop running from it. That evening after dinner I walked the property alone the way I did most evenings when I was working. The piece was taking a shape I had not expected. I had come to write about the resort as a place, and I was writing about it as an experience. About what it did to you when you removed all the motion and the noise and were just somewhere, with yourself, without the next thing already lined up. I sat on a low stone wall at the edge of the olive grove and looked back at the lit windows of the farmhouse and thought about 6 years of movement, and how I had never once in 6 years woken up in a place and thought, "I want to stay." I had never let myself think it. By the end of the first week, something had shifted in the rhythm of the resort. Not just between Raphael and me. The whole place had a way of doing that to people. Any Circumflex had designed it deliberately: the communal meals, the unhurried schedule, the specific absence of things to do that meant you had to be somewhere instead of doing something. By day 5, the other guests had started talking to each other the way people talk when they have run out of the polite surface layer and gotten to actual things. But between Raphael and me, the shift was more specific. We had a routine now: pool in the morning before anyone else was up, breakfast together, our own separate days. He drew and read and sometimes walked the property for hours at a time, and I wrote and walked and did the observational work the piece required. Then dinner in the group, and after dinner sometimes a walk or a drink on one of our terraces. The terraces were side by side, a low stone divider between them. We had discovered this on the 4th day, and after that the divider became something we sat on either side of talking until the night got late. He told me more about the relationship. His ex-boyfriend, he said the word plainly, and I noted that it did not require any pause or preparation. He was fully comfortable in his own skin in that way, had been a man named Tiago who was warm and good and with whom the problem was not love but direction. Tiago had wanted to settle. A house, a specific city, a fixed future. Raphael wanted to keep building things, not just architecturally but in terms of his work, his ideas, the projects that excited him. And somewhere in the 3rd year they had both admitted that the person they loved and the life they each needed were pulling in opposite directions. It was not a betrayal, he said. It was just an incompatibility that we both ignored for a year longer than we should have. How did it end? I said. Quietly, he said, which was harder than loud would have been. Loud you can get angry at, quiet you just have to sit with. I thought about that. I asked him once how he had known, about being gay, about that particular part of himself. He looked at me with the directness that was particular to him. I always knew, he said. There was no moment of realization, more like a moment of deciding to stop pretending I did not know. Those are different things. I was quiet. What about you? He said. I have known since I was about 17, I said. The coming out process was fine, my family was fine, I was fine, but there is a difference between knowing something about yourself and actually letting it be part of how you live, and I think I kept that part at arm's length for a long time. Because of what he said. I thought about it honestly. Because wanting something real means you can actually lose it, I said. If you keep moving, you do not have to find out whether the things you want are actually available to you. He looked at me for a long moment. That is a very honest thing to say, he said. It surprised me too, I said. He smiled, not the almost smile he usually wore, a real one that reached his eyes and stayed. On the 7th day, we swam together for the first time. I do not mean this to sound significant and then make it sound significant, but the truth is that everything about this particular day was different from the days before it. The way a week of building pressure creates a day where the air feels different before the weather changes. We were at the pool in the late afternoon. The other guests were napping or inside during the heat of the day, and the pool was ours. The water at that hour was the warmest it got, soaked through with the afternoon sun, and the light was starting to go golden at the edges, the way it did in Portugal in the summer, where the golden hour was less an hour and more a long, slow conversation between the sun and everything it touched. We had been in the water separately, and then we were in the water near each other, and then we were at the far end of the pool leaning against the wall side by side talking about nothing in particular and everything real the way we had been doing for a week. He said something that made me laugh. I do not remember what exactly, something dry and precise and perfectly timed in the way of his humor. I laughed, and when I stopped laughing I was smiling and he was smiling, and the water was warm and the light was gold, and we were very close. He reached over and took my hand. Not dramatically, not as a declaration. Just reached over and held my hand the way you hold something you have been careful with and have decided to stop being careful about hiding that you are careful with. I looked down at our hands in the water. My heart was doing something I did not have a protocol for. I did not pull away. I just held his hand and looked at the far hills where the sun was going down slowly and the whole landscape was going amber and red, and I felt something that I had been running from for 6 years arrive very quietly through my chest. Not terror, not the thing I had always expected the arrival of something real to feel like. Just warmth. Just the specific relief of being exactly where you are. We stayed like that until the sun was fully down. Neither of us said anything about it. We did not need to. That night at dinner I caught him looking at me from across the table, and I did not look away, and he did not either, and Inez circumflex refilled everyone's wine glasses, and asked what people wanted to do tomorrow, and the conversation went on around us, and underneath it something was completely settled. Later on the terraces he said, I want to say something. I said okay. He said, I was not planning for this. I came here to process something that ended and I was not looking for anything else, and I want to be honest with you about that because I think you deserve honesty. I understand, I said. But he said, I also want to be honest that whatever this is, he made a small gesture that encompassed the evening and the past week and the pool. I do not want to pretend it is not happening because it is convenient not to feel things. I looked at him. I have been pretending it is convenient not to feel things for 6 years, I said. I am genuinely tired of it. He looked at me in the dark with the night sounds of the Alentejo around us, crickets and distant water and the warm dark. Then do not, he said. I said I am working on it. He said, I know, I can see you working on it, that is actually one of the things. What things? I said. He smiled. The things about you, he said, there are several. I looked at the sky, impossibly full of stars the way skis are in places with no light pollution. I said there are several things about you too. He was quiet. Then good, he said, that seems like the right place to be. The second week of my stay was supposed to be the week I wrote the formal piece. The notes were complete. I had everything I needed for the resort profile: the details, the atmosphere, the story of Ani Circumflex and how the property came to be, the food, the landscape, the particular quality of the silence that the Alentejo provided. I could have written it in 3 days and spent the rest of the time on the next assignment, which was already waiting in my inbox from a small coastal town in the Azores. I did not write the formal piece in 3 days. I wrote something else. I wrote about what it felt like to stop moving, not as a travel piece, as something more personal than that, a long essay, the kind I had never submitted because they were too real, and I had spent 6 years crafting a professional identity built on observing places at a careful distance. I wrote about 6 years of airports and hotel rooms and new cities, and the specific skill I had developed of finding the soul of somewhere in 10 days, while never quite letting anywhere find mine. I wrote about hands held in pool water at golden hour. I did not send it anywhere, I just wrote it. For the same reason Raphael drew in the mornings, not for an outcome, just to process, just to put something real onto a page and let it be there. Raphael read it on the 9th day. I did not plan to show it to him. He was on my terrace when I was editing it on my laptop, and he said, "What are you writing?" And I said something personal, and he said, "Can I read it?" And I said yes before I had thought about it. He read it carefully. He was a careful reader the way he was a careful everything. When he finished, he put the laptop down on the table and looked at the olive grove. "This is the best thing you have written," he said. "You have not read anything else I have written," I said. "I know," he said, "but I can tell." I looked at my hands. "It is not submittable," I said. It gives too much away." He was quiet for a moment. "What would happen if you submitted it?" he said. I thought about it. "People would know what I actually think," I said. He looked at me with that direct, unhurried look. "Would that be terrible?" he said. I sat with that question longer than I needed to. "Probably not," I said. He said, "Send it." I said, "It mentions you." He said, "I know." I said, "You do not mind." He said, "Jasper, I held your hand in a pool in Portugal in front of the entire sunset. I am not particularly worried about privacy." I laughed. He smiled. I sent it to my editor the following morning with a note that said, "This is not the piece you assigned me, but it might be better." She called me 3 hours later and said it was the best thing I had sent her in 4 years, and when could she have more like it. That afternoon, Raphael and I went for a long walk through the cork oak forest that bordered the property. It was one of the walks he had been doing alone since he arrived. He knew the paths now, where they opened up, where they narrowed, where the light came through the trees in a particular way that made you want to stop and stay. He showed me all of it. We walked for 2 hours and talked about things that were not what I usually talked about in the first 10 days of knowing someone. The kind of things that usually came later or not at all, depending on whether you let them. His relationship with his father, who had died when he was 23. The project he had walked away from before the necessary break, a commission for a community center in Lisbon that had started as the most exciting thing he had ever been asked to build and slowly become something being built by committee in a way that was removing everything he had loved about it. The question of what you do when the thing you love becomes something you no longer recognize. I told him about my mother, about the way she had made a home out of every difficult thing that happened to her, and how I had always admired that and also been unable to understand it from the inside because making a home required being willing to stay, and I had not known how. He was quiet after I said that. Then he said, "What would staying look like for you, concretely, if you decided to do it?" I thought about it. "A base," I said, "somewhere that was mine, not a city I am assigned to, somewhere I choose. And the writing, more of what I sent today and less of the assigned stuff that keeps me moving for its own sake." He nodded. "That sounds like something you could actually build," he said. "I know," I said, "that is the terrifying part." He stopped walking. I stopped. He was looking at me with the full attention that was particular to him, the kind that did not leave room for performing or deflecting. "Can I say something?" he said. "Yes," I said. "I know we have known each other 9 days," he said, "and I know that is not long, and I am not saying this to put pressure on anything or to make this into more than it is able to be in 9 days. But I want to say it because I do not believe in not saying true things when you know they are true." I waited. You are someone I want to know for longer than 10 days, he said, whatever that means logistically, whatever that looks like. I am not asking for a plan. I am just saying I want more of this, and I am willing to figure out what more looks like if you are. The cork trees were around us, and the afternoon light came through them in pieces, and the forest was very quiet except for birds somewhere above us. I had spent 6 years moving so that I never had to stand in a place like this and feel what I was feeling right now. The feeling, it turned out, was not terrifying. It was enormous and warm and a little overwhelming and completely right. Yes, I said, I am willing to figure out what more looks like. He reached over and took my hand again. We walked back through the forest like that, holding on, the light changing around us as the afternoon moved toward evening. My last 2 days at the resort were the best 2 days. Not because anything dramatic happened, because nothing needed to. We had breakfast with the other guests who had become a small temporary community, the way people become communities when they are all in the same place at the same pace for long enough. We swam in the mornings. He drew and I wrote. We ate dinner with an e-circumflex who had noticed everything with the perceptive warmth of someone who ran a place designed for exactly this kind of thing to happen. On my last evening, she brought out a local wine that she said she saved for occasions and would not say what the occasion was but looked at both of us when she opened it. Raphael walked me to the stone road where the transfer car was picking me up at 7 in the morning on the final day. He was flying back to Lisbon that afternoon. We stood in the early morning gray with the olive trees around us and the resort quiet behind us and the country road empty in both directions. He said Lisbon is not far from an airport. I said Belmir has direct flights to Lisbon. He said I know, I checked. I looked at him. When did you check? I said. Day 6, he said. Day 6, I said. He was almost smiling. I was being optimistic, he said. I said I am going to the Azores for 10 days, then I am coming back to Belmir, and then I am going to find somewhere to actually live for more than one assignment. He said and then. And then I said, I think Lisbon in October. He looked at me in the early morning light. October is good, he said. I will show you the city properly, not the travel piece version. The real version, I said. The real version, he said. The car appeared at the end of the stone road. He put his hand on the side of my face for a moment, the way you touch something you mean to come back to. Then he kissed me, slow and warm in the Portuguese morning with the olive trees around us and the whole quiet landscape holding still. When I got in the car, I looked back. He was still standing there. He raised one hand. I raised mine. The car moved down the stone road and the olive trees went past and the resort disappeared and the red earth of the Alentejo opened up around me and I took out my phone and started writing. Not notes for the piece, something for myself, about what it felt like to stop at the end of 6 years of motion and find that the stillness was not empty, that the thing I had been moving away from had not, as it turned out, been a threat. It had been the whole point. I wrote for the entire 2-hour transfer back to Lisbon. Then I sent him what I had written. He replied from the resort, one line. This is what staying feels like, keep writing it. I went to the Azores. I wrote the most honest travel piece I had ever written about a place. I went back to Belmir and I looked at the city with the specific eyes of someone who had been somewhere slow and come back changed. I found an apartment, a real one, not month to month, not temporary, with a desk by the window that got morning light and a bookshelf I unpacked properly for the first time in 6 years. I hung the one photograph I had from the resort. A picture Inni Circumflex had taken without us knowing, 2 people sitting at the edge of a pool with their feet in the water, one leaning slightly toward the other, the late afternoon gold on everything. In October I went to Lisbon. Raphael showed me the city from the inside, the neighborhoods where he had grown up, the studio where he worked, the restaurant where his mother ate every Sunday. The waterfront at evening when the light on the Tagus did the thing it did in that specific hour that made everything feel like it was made of something slightly better than ordinary materials. We walked a lot. He pointed at buildings and told me what he saw in them, not just the structures but the thinking behind the structures, the decisions that had been made, the problems that had been solved. I listened the way I listened to places, with my whole attention, and I understood for the first time what it would mean to know a place through someone who loved it. He read everything I published. I watched every project he worked on take shape slowly through the drawings he showed me and the conversations we had about what he was trying to build and why. That winter, I published the essay I had written at the resort. The one about 6 years of moving, about hands held in pool water, about the specific moment when you stop running and the thing you were running from turns out to have been the life you were supposed to be living. It was the most read thing I had ever published. I got letters from people who recognized themselves in it, people who had been moving, people who were still moving, people who had stopped and wanted to tell someone that the stopping was survivable and even good. I wrote back to all of them because I knew exactly what they were describing. And because the only thing better than finding your way to stillness after a long time moving is being able to tell someone else that it is possible, that what waits on the other side of all the running is not emptiness. It is warmth. It is a hand in the water. It is October in Lisbon with someone who checked the flights on day 6 because he was being optimistic and turned out to be right.